just done all my chores. Cleaning helps me think. And it's Saturday, so I always do the majority of all my big chores on a Saturday. I break my housework up during the week because of my stomach and back, but the hoovering and all of that I do mostly on the weekend. Cleaning the bathrooms and that I do mostly on the weekend. But it helps me clean. It helps me think. And remember in my last video I said I was going to start with looking at the theory of relativity. E equals mc squared. I'm sitting here thinking, I think the mistake that Einstein made was that he used maths. But looking at the theory of relativity from my perspective, knowing that the consciousness of an atom is made up of time, gravity, momentum, magnetism, and balance in the middle, and then looking at my perspective on the theory of relativity, see the thumbnail? That's when I looked up the theory of relativity and images, that came up under, his image, and that's exactly what I was saying about threading the threads of the timeline. And if you look at that orange bit in the middle, think of that as the core of an atom, and everything in the universe is made up of atoms. And what goes in and out of that atom decides the direction in which the atom goes from a biological evolutionary perspective. So in thinking what's happened and me trying to figure it all out, the only way I know how, I'm looking at the theory of relativity first. I might look at Faraday's, induction theory and all that sort of thing, but for now I'm going to start with the theory of relativity, and I kind of understanding what happened to me like this using that theory. Everything is relative. Everything in the universe, every choice, every decision, every biological advancement, every ascension, every descension, either on a cellular level, molecular level, atomic level, is all relative to itself. It's all relative to each other. And I keep saying, we have to work together in order to evolve, in order to advance, in order to get us off this planet and see what else is out there and join the rest of them. It's all relative. It's all connected. Everything we do, everything we say, from the very first initial Big Bang to the one that we're in now, because the universe hasn't finished expanding, because we're still in the throes of the explosion of the last Big Bang. But it's all relative, it's all connected, and if you look at every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In the door, inside, outside, standing in the doorway. Good, bad. So, you know how they say all roads to hell are paved with good intentions? It's just like that. Everybody starts out in politics thinking that they want to do good by the people and do right by blah, but somewhere along the line, something is triggered in them that brings out what was fed to them from a cellular, molecular level by their ancestors who had every intention of doing harm in the world. And the actions and choices and decisions they make when they're given the opportunity to do the right thing by humanity or do the wrong thing by humanity is the equal. That's the equalizer. The equalizer is what you do next, what happens next. The dog can guard the people or bite the people. But how the dog was raised will decide what the dog does next. But the same works in reverse. You can do bad, you can do things wrong, you can make mistakes, you can sin, depending on how you want to look at it. But if you come in with an equalized, like, I need to make this right, I've got to do right, I don't want to do this anymore, I have to do what's right, that's the equal. So then the opposite happens. If you did bad, the equalizing decision is what you decide to do next. If you own up to your mistakes, if you own up to what you did, the equalizer then takes it in the positive direction, because you're sewing up the tear in the fabric of the timeline that was created when you chose to make the wrong decision. Now, if you look at that thumbnail, you know how I was talking about the universe is inside two bubbles, and there's, the equal, I think, is it not actually called the equalizer? The fluctuations when you turn the volume up and you mess around with the dials, and it goes from like yellow and green and orange and red and all that, and it goes up and down, up and down, up and down, and it fluctuates. Is that not called an equalizer? On stereos, and when you're working with sound, and like when you're recording albums and that, and they sit in the recording booth and they move those things up and down, and they turn the dials up and down, and like an amplifier on a stereo, is that not called an equalizer? I'm not technological, so I don't know, but that's our universe, and all our actions and decisions, even including that of animals, even including that of plants. A plant can decide not to poison you, decides what happens next. And the only way we're ever going to get off this planet and get to join everyone else in the new universe is if we all work together to equalize and balance our past and present reactions to determine the direction of the trajectory of where we're going next. And what my son and I did, by him coming back into my life and him and I talking and smoothing things out, and I'm not going to judge. My boys are not to blame for anything that happened. I'm never ever going to hold them responsible for anything that happened. They've done no wrong in my eyes. They're victims. By my son and I talking again, and us spending that time together and recorrecting the imbalance of what happened, that was the equalizer. And in doing that, it catapulted us where Chris and Martin and Trump and all that were trying to slow everything down between me and my boys to stop from happening what they feared would happen. My son stepped in and became the equalizer. By him talking to me and coming to me and us talking and me supporting him and him supporting me, because I told him about my alien invasion movie and all that sort of thing, which is really funny. And then we started talking, and he was telling me about the lore of his, his friends that he meets in Discord, and that we unlocked something and it became the equalizer, which then catapulted us and sped time up to speed up the inevitable tear down of everyone that's responsible for causing all the trouble in the world. And now, as a consequence, the opposite has happened, which was, instead of Trump being emperor of the world, being exalted by Musk and the EU and NATO and Starmer and all that, they're now being torn down. So what they were building, thinking that, our action is going to have this reaction, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Thomas and I were the equalizer. And his name means twin. So he's the equal and the opposite, but he's the twin bearer of Christ. Thomas Christopher, that's what his name means. So he's literally like the fulcrum in the scales. By him talking to me again, and him and I kind of smoothing everything over and just sort of slowly rebuilding what we had lost, he became the equalizer because it's in his name. He's the twin bearer of Christ. He's the twin bearer of the second coming. He's the twin. He's like one half of each scale. He's also Capricorn, so he is the ruler of divine universal law. He's Satan. He's ruled by Satan. And Satan is the equalizer. And this is what Einstein was talking about, the theory of relativity. It's all relative, as well as it's all to do with who your relatives are. Like I'm starting to understand it now. Your bloodline and what you're destined to become, and whether you're allowed to unlock your mutant genes and DNA, was all planted in the past, going all the way back to the original Big Bang. And the course that your ancestors chose to take in order to get you to who you are now is all based on the actions and decisions they made when they were weaving their own thread through the fabric of time. And my bloodline, my boys and I, my son and I, we've been up against the people who did bad things throughout history. They're Nazis, they're fascists, they murder royal bloodlines. They're the Antichrist. And my son is the bearer of Christ. He's not religious. He's open-minded. He's kind of getting his feel as to what it is he wants to believe. And my boys are allowed to do that 100%. Faith is found, not taught. You have to find your faith. But it is all in your name. It is all in who your ancestors created you to be. So if you have good intentions, every action and decision you make seals your fate. If you keep making good decisions, there is no opposite reaction. And you just evolve. That's the theory of evolution. But every action you take, if you have no balance of the subconscious and conscious mind, and your subconscious is where logic, doubt, reason, compromise, common sense and all that live, as well as your instincts. If you don't have the perfect balance between conscious and subconscious, conscious and subconscious, conscious being the atomic frequency, subconscious being the earthbound frequency, the 3D physical reality because it's in your brain, and your subconscious is all determined by how healthy your brain is, the health of the society that raised you. That is what builds your subconscious. And it's all underlying in instinct, whereas your conscience comes from the higher realms. It comes from what you were born already knowing who you were before you were conceived, and carrying that memory with you. You were born carrying the needle and thread, but where you put the needle all decides on the fabric that you're given to sew. And society and your family and your environment hands you the material. So by my son becoming the equalizer, we balanced the karmic scales out, because that's exactly what he rules. Whereas I am bee of the meadow, so I pollinate. I give birth to things. I take what I have and I pick it up and run with it, and I plant seeds everywhere and I pollinate and I grow. But if I was imbalanced, everything would die. See, everything Elon Musk and Bill Gates and that touch dies. Everything they touch dies because they have a toxic, poisonous mindset, and the cells and their atomic structure are imbalanced and like brain damage. They have brain damage, and so they can't create from an evolutionary ascending vantage point, because they're all born brain damaged. I know Chris was, I know Martin is, I know Rocio is, suffers some form of brain damage. I know that, like, from a medical perspective, because they told me. They were all diagnosed, two of them were locked up in psychiatric hospitals because they're brain damaged. Donald Trump is clearly brain damaged. We know Elon Musk is brain damaged. And that's why they only create in toxic environments, because all the choices and decisions they make, thinking I'm the good guy, like everyone's going to love me and everyone's going to love me and I'm popular and I'm famous and I'm rich and good, is leading them to the path of the opposite reaction. Their action, thinking that they were paving the road to good intentions, ended up leading them straight to hell because there was no equalizer. They don't use logic, they don't use reason, they don't use common sense, they don't use compromise, and they're not connected to their conscience. Because anyone that can do the sort of things that they've done to humanity, to their own wives, to their own children, to other people's children, to animals, to the planet, that sort of thing has no conscience. Because guilt would be the equalizer. And if you've done things and you're harbouring guilt, that means you still have a conscience, and the equalizer for that would be, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to fix it? Are you going to apologise? Are you going to give it back, take it back, confess to what you did, that sort of thing. And then if you do that, that changes your fate. So instead of going to hell, you might only go to purgatory. And when you go to purgatory, it gives you the opportunity to think about what you've done and make the decision to never make those mistakes again, and then you're allowed to try again. So, and you don't have to die to be in purgatory. Purgatory can be where people turn their back on you and you have to suffer a little bit and go without, so that you can sit long enough to decide, okay, what mistakes did I make? If I harbour guilt, like that sort of thing, that's where the logic, doubt and reason comes in. So then what do you do next? And that's what happened to me, and I 100% hold my hand up to that. And what happened to me, it gave me the time to sit and think about, why is this happening to me? What have I done in the course of my lifetime? What have my ancestors done in the course of their lifetime that brought me to this point where I was chosen to be the one to offer up myself as the sacrifice in order to be the equalizer? And how my genetic memory is carried on through my children and my grandchildren and all that. Because I don't want my grandkids, if I have any, or my children having to suffer from the same things that I did, because I made the wrong choice, and the men that I married and the friends that I brought into the home and the students that I trusted to try and teach what I was. You have to understand that my students, I was offering them all of this knowledge that I have now, and God said no, because they're not good people. Just because you work in a Catholic school, just because you work with special needs people, doesn't mean they're a good person. And God was kind of like, well, I mean, technically the God in this case was Horus, because he's the protector of royal bloodlines. He is my amulet. When it comes to, he spooks everyone away that isn't allowed anywhere near my physical person. He was like, no, I'm not allowing you to hand the knowledge of Hoth and Atom to the dark side. So I have to yeet you out of it. And now you're going to sit, young lady, and think about what you've done. And I got put on the naughty step. But I had to go through hell in order to find the silence, because I was surrounded by so much noise. And then, because of how my brain works and I'm an ascension scientist, I thought, okay, why am I going through all of this? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And then having that time of contemplation, sitting in purgatory, I was like, oh my God. And then, of course, when you're in the ether stage of your ascension, that's when you're learning about your ancestors, and you want to find out about where you came from and who your ancestors were, and understanding that there was a larger force at play and what was happening to me in regards to I had to pay off a lot of karmic debt. We are here to pay off a lot of karmic debt for ancestors. And if you're people like Donald Trump and Christopher Black and Elon Musk and von der Leyen and Zelensky and that, and your ancestors did really bad things like genocides and holocausts and mass slaughter and, you know, pandemics and all that sort of thing that's responsible for the deaths of billions of people, you have to pay it off. But if you continue the bad deeds, if you continue the bad acts, you pass that on to your children, and that's what I'm trying to save my sons from, because they're around the dark element, they're around the destructor, whereas I'm the creator, and I'm trying to get them away so that what their father is doesn't become ingrained in them, because he's a bad person, he's a sexual predator, he's a murderer, an attempted murderer, he's a liar, he's a thief, an identity theft, he's a domestic abuser to both to his ex and his kids. He uses mind control and manipulation and that in order to get away with what he's doing. I don't want my kids being a part of that. And I'm not going to force my youngest with anything, but my eldest stepped up, and he became the equalizer. And because there was no need to talk about what happened, because he knows I'm never going to hold them. I don't care about any of that. I just care about their mental health and their emotional stability and their well-being. So we bonded again, and I've been helping him out with something that he was dealing with, and we started creating again. But this time, what we created unlocked something in the universe. It's like we unlocked the door to dark matter and started filling it up with pinpoints of light that are now going to create something bigger to expand the universe. We've pollinated dark matter with something that was taken from we took something that was being torn down from an atomic level that was destined for destruction based on the actions of what was created by Trump and all that, and we have opened up the access to the universe that was otherwise dark matter, and we've pollinated it with something. I said they'd be trapped in liminal space where they'd become like a pinball machine, and everything they hit would break them down a little more and a little more. I said, like smashing shells on a rock, where eventually they would be turned into space dust. But the fact of the matter is that the universe takes and rounds up everything that is floating about and gathers it all in using momentum and magnetism to create something from nothing, which is conjuring. So we're conjuring matter to fill up dark matter. We conjured matter to fill up dark matter. So from the destruction by tearing down the fabric of time, by picking it apart and sewing it back up again, we've filled dark matter with the remnants of the past that are going to create something better in the future because of it. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And Thomas was the equalizer. And it's funny because I keep saying Satan's come to side to help tear everything down. My son is technically Satan because he's a Capricorn. And in the tarot cards, that's the devil, although they need to stop calling him the devil, and they need to stop calling Lucifer Satan. Lucifer is the Dark Lord. Satan is the God. He's the god of the devils and demons. Satan is a god. Satan is God's wrath. Satan works for God. Lucifer's the bad guy. Molech's the bad guy. Beelzebub's the bad guy. Belial, Baphomet, Baal, they're all the bad guys. But they all fear Satan. Because Satan is the god of destruction. He's the one that comes and tears everything down. He is the judge's gavel of the universe. If you do wrong by God, you will meet Satan. But first you shall be judged. And depending on the action you take will decide what happens next. And if you take a bad action thinking it's a good action, then bad results will happen consequently. But the equalizer is in, if you make a mistake, how are you going to fix it, or are you going to fix it? If you don't, then you descend and everything gets torn down. So, okay. So the theory of evolution is all based on the theory of relativity, based on the fact that it's all relative. And if you do good and you keep yourself balanced and you keep a healthy subconscious mind, your trajectory into the advancement of evolution from a cellular level, atomic level, evolutionary perspective, you will evolve at the speed of light. If you do good and don't fix it, you end up on a path to destruction. If you do bad and don't fix it, you end on a path of destruction. From a cellular level, from an atomic level, from an evolutionary standpoint. But it's all relative. And who you're around and who you let get in your head and who you work for and what you do for them all decides not just your fate, but your descendants' fate, your ancestors' fate, and the fate of humanity and the fate of the universe. It's all relative. And that's what I've got so far. But there has to be a name for what my son and I did. I'm thinking Faraday, possibly. We injected ourselves into something that... But it doesn't feel right. See, Michael Faraday, uneducated. See, they all thought that there was something wrong with me because I have no education, but I can do all of this. Michael Faraday didn't have an education. Einstein didn't even talk until he was 7. He was technically like what they would call autistic. So that's what I've got so far, but there has to be a name for what my son and I did. We unlocked something that opened up dark matter to pollinate it somewhere with sparks of light, just like how you see in the thumbnail that has pollinated dark matter somehow, so that in the future what we've put out there is going to grow into something through, you know how the rings of Saturn, you know how Saturn is pulling stuff in to feed itself so that it can grow. And the rings of Saturn and that is everything that it's been pulling in using magnetism. We've done something like that, except instead of using magnetism to pull it in, the dark side came to us, drawn by our light. We used what I call Archimedes' bow, the reverse engineered portal, to bounce back what it was that they sent to us, and in turn, instead of using magnetism, we used momentum. As my son would say, call it the yeet effect. We yeeted it. We yeeted the energy. Yeet. Whoop, pushed it out. Pushed it away. But it's like we opened something that then allowed for the destruction to begin. And that's why witnessing Trump's name being torn down from the Kennedy Center, we were watching history in the making, and that's why it reminded me of watching the Americans and the Allies in that tearing down the swastikas and, setting the Nazi flags on fire and blowing up the buildings and the headquarters and that of the Nazis and the SS and Hitler's houses and stuff, although it was to cover it was to cover the tracks of the people the Allies in World War Two and World War One had no idea that they were sent to war by their own government, who didn't know that their government were the bad guys. So the soldiers of World War One, basically soldiers on a battlefield, become the sin eaters to their governments in their, Wall Street and the Pentagon and Parliament and MI5, MI6, that sort of thing. They become the sin eaters. They send them on the battlefield to do their dirty work so that they can hide the fact that they're the bad guys. The only good guys were the innocent people who died on both sides, on all sides. So that created an imbalance because the rights of the last few wars weren't corrected. The balance with what happened in Palestine, it's not been corrected. There's been no correction, and because there's been no correction, it has then created the opposite reaction. Whereas Trump wanted to have the board of peace, it's now the board of chaos, and all these nations that signed up to it are being torn down. All the people that went along with what he was doing is all now getting torn down because they didn't do what was right. They didn't correct the balance. Therefore, they will all lose everything, including people like Chris and Martin and everyone that was sent to try and stop me and my boys. Because it doesn't matter the role they played, no matter how big, no matter how small, they didn't recorrect the balance. And by doing the wrong thing and not making up for what they did, they will now lose everything because Trump is being torn down and Starmer's being torn down and the EU's being torn down. Because every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And by my son talking to me and us sewing everything back up again, he became the equalizer. He was the one that decided to reach out and balance the scales, and in doing that, it catapulted us. It sped time up because time had been slowed down because of everything that happened last year. So it's all relative. Who your relatives are, how you deal with everything on a relative scale, it's all relative. It's all connected. So bollocks to E equals MC squared. It's the theory of relativity is the theory of evolution. The theory of the evolution of the atom, as in the theory of the evolution of God, because God is the atom. We are all our own God. We are all God. If we have control over what we create and who we become, we are in ourself our own God. We are our own conscious mediator. We are the one that decides whether we get karma or dharma. We are our own equalizer. And my son was the equalizer. And it's bringing about the destruction of everything that God said in the Bible, in the book of Revelation. Wow. So that's what I've got so far, but there has to be a name for what him and I did. I'm going to re-examine the whole Faraday and, induction thing, but maybe. So that's what I've got so far. But that thumbnail is basically everything I described if you look at from a microscopic level, from a macro to the micro. That little orange bit in the middle is the consciousness inside the atom, and everything drawn in and out of it decides what structure the cells surrounding the atom become, but also on a macroscopic level, that is everything being fed in and out of our expanding universe, deciding whether we expand or contract, grow and evolve, or die out and descend, based on what we weave into the fabric of our timeline. And those little sparks that you see are either the sparks of creation or the sparks of destruction. That's why I put it up as a thumbnail. Okay? And black holes, when everything falls off the evolutionary scale, black holes chew it up, spit it out, and then let evolution decide what the spit up becomes next. Decides what it spits out becomes next. And so my son and I spat something out. We chewed something up and spat it out. And it's going to have some effect in the future to do with the evolution of mankind. Probably my space program, right? So they're currently in the process of being sucked into the black hole and chewed up and spat back out, which is the end of the Quantum Menace 2, the Battle of Two Worlds. The illusionist in Meltdown pulled the arena back to reveal that it was all an illusion, it was all fake, that they were not living in reality, they were living in an illusion because of what the illusionist had drawn and created, which he wanted them to think they were in like a Greek amphitheatre, like a gladiator's arena. That's where the final battle takes place in Quantum Menace 2, the Battle of Two Worlds, which is our version of a comic book superhero movie, our Marvel DC stuff. But it's the Quantum Menace and the Mutant Legion Battle of Two Worlds. Because it's not just the Quantum Menace, it's the Quantum Menace Mutant Legion. And my two boys are the illusionists of Meltdown. They're mummy's mutants. And so they get sucked into the black hole. They get sucked into the abyss. And then it ends with the conception of Heracles, Heracles coming down. And then that turns into our version of Star Wars. Well, we've just done that. We've just reversed time. So my son and I together, like we threw them into the black hole, we've reversed time to undo the conception of Trump. So that's why I was saying in the live feed when they were taking his name down, I said to people, we need to remember this moment because we're watching history in the making. But there has to be a name for what my son and I did, and I need to find it. Otherwise, I need to come up with a name. This was something so much bigger than Archimedes' bow and reverse engineering a portal. There has to be a name for it, and I shall find it. So that's what I have so far. I shall speak to you later. I'm so proud of my boys. I've got to get justice now so I can get them out of here because they can't be around that man anymore because he's on the path to self-destruction. And my worst fear is they're going to become like their father or they get taken down because of their father, and that will be over my undead body. I'll speak to you later. Ka kite.